morning, welcome to Whitewater Ski Resort and Backcountry Skiing Canada's Avalanche Conditions Report for February 20th, 2015. I'm Ren McElroy, I'm the Snow Safety Supervisor here at Whitewater and run the Avalanche Control Program. Today we thought we would talk about what goes into our avalanche forecasting and how we do some of our decision making. And then we'll head outside and take a look at some of the past evidence of recent avalanche cycle that we've gone through. So for the weekend, Avalanche Canada is calling the hazard low in our region. We've had some significant weather with a big storm cycle last week, and then we had cooling temperatures, which has created a bit of a crust that's kind of capping everything. So avalanche hazard isn't very high right now. The travel conditions are a bit difficult. We've gone through a spring melt-freeze cycle, and temperatures have cooled off a little bit right now. So good traveling, a little bit difficult on the skiing front. So what we do when we come in the morning, we get a weather forecast, and we get a weather forecast from a local weather forecaster at the Southeast Fire Center out of Castlegar, and they give us a synopsis. We talk about our freezing levels, and then they give us estimated snowfall amounts, precipitation and temperature and freezing level. So we'll analyze that, and we put all of this information into a hazard forecast and a risk analysis. So we'll go through our weather forecast, what's happening in our local areas. Every day we do twice daily observations that we record in a weather book, and we bring that information in. And then as we go through, we'll talk about any significant changes. So this is one that we had gone through in that last avalanche cycle from February 8th. So we had mild temperatures, we had 7 centimeters of new snow with light to moderate southwest winds, and fairly mild temperatures at -1 to -2. We'll go through our nearest neighbors, so nearest operations, and any significant avalanche activity that they've seen. It helps us have an idea of what's going on in the bigger picture around our area. And then what kind of results we've been getting. So whether we're ski cutting, we're throwing explosives, or we're seeing natural avalanche activity. And through that cycle, we did see a large size 3 avalanche come down. We couldn't see the start zones, but we could see the debris in the bottom. Then we define our avalanche problems. So our first problem, we had about 75 centimeters of storm snow. By the time the cycle was finished, we had close to a meter. We had 95 centimeters of storm snow. So we had a storm slab. We talked about the size. We expected size 2 to 3 avalanches, the sensitivity to triggering, and then the spatial distribution. So it was a widespread distribution. The next layer of concern, we were talking about the January 15th surface hoar, and at the time it was down 75 to 100 centimeters. Again, we called it a persistent slab. And then we're still talking about that December 17th surface hoar and crust layer. So that's been a concern all through the winter. When we were worried about this initial storm slab failing, the concern would be that it could step down to the next layer and then potentially step down to the layer after that. So we're gathering all this data, and then we summarize this in a chart, and we talk about the likelihood of triggering, whether it's very likely we could trigger it, likely, possible, or unlikely, and rate that against the destructive size. So a small avalanche would be a size 1, and a larger avalanche in our area would be a 3 to a 3.5. So with our problems, that storm cycle, that storm snow we were talking about, we thought it was very likely, and we could go from size 1.5 to size 3 as an example there. Then we'll talk about our actual danger ratings. At the time, we were calling it high in the alpine, and then in tree line and below we were calling it considerable. Then we'll talk about our operational plans for the day. So we're going to do some explosives in our closed areas, go out and try and gather any information, whether we're digging profiles to answer any questions. If we have a question, well, how high is that crust, or what's the spatial distribution of the surface hoar? So this is a big part of our morning. We also go through and we'll summarize this in a more simplified version, and we call it our glass case. We do a bit of a public forecast for our area, and so we'll summarize that and condense that information that we can share with the public. Other factors that go into that are our snow profiles, and in last week's vlog we showed an example. This is a recent one that was done at 2,276 meters in our area, in our backcountry area. So for the locals, just below Half Dome on the 5 mile side. The snowpack is becoming more homogeneous. What we're looking for here is, do we have something stiff overlying something weak? And generally it's looking like a fairly solid snowpack. This little layer here shows the thick crust on the top, and with some looser snow and then another crust. It's starting to break apart there. And the biggest concern here is that we still have the January 15th surface hoar layer, and it's down over a meter in this location at over 2,000 meters. And it's still failing. We're still getting sudden collapse results, so drops a result where the snowpack, the weak layer, fails and has a significant drop. So that is still of a concern. In a lot of areas, people think that this crust at the top is kind of capping everything, and for the most part it is, but we don't want to forget about these. So that's why we identify these avalanche problems and we talk about them. So through that natural cycle, these are our control sheets. So we track all of our explosive controlled avalanches, our ski cut avalanches, and then our natural avalanches. And on that cycle, we noted on February 6th that we'd had a large avalanche into Whitewater Bowl. So we marked that with red here. But the start zones were obscured, so we had a lot of fog, we had a lot of heavy snowfall, so we couldn't see where that avalanche had come from, but we knew that this avalanche had some mature timber in it and was quite destructive. Later on, as the visibility improved, we could see the crowns where most of the snow released, probably where the freezing levels were, with that transition from the rain to the heavier snow. And we did have some crowns up into this area as well, so some of the snow came down from up there. So we'll talk again about the weather patterns, we'll talk about the size, and we'll identify that. These are some of our inbounds terrain as well. This was some of our explosive controls, so we have names for all our shot placements, and we'll document our size. And then we can keep track of that. Areas, well, we didn't hit this, so we need to go back, or areas of concern that we can keep track of. Some of the other information that we've been taking a look at, it's been such an odd winter for us, not a normal what we think is not a normal typical whitewater winter. We've gone through and done some historical data, and for the last 23 years, this shows for each year, so from 91, 92, all the way up to 2013, 2014, it shows the accumulated snowfall for each month. So January is blue, February is red, and then March is the green. And this black line shows the end of the season base, so where we finished at. So that's the 300 centimeter. So back in 98, 99, we finished at over 500 centimeters. So you can see the general trend. And this doesn't have this year's statistics, but we're actually not that far off this year. Our accumulated monthly snowfall is slightly down over the year, but our height of snowpack, we actually have the same amount of snow up high. We have a little more snow up high at our weather plot at 1,950 meters on the north aspect. We have more snow this year than we did last year. Lower elevation, down at the base of the Glory, 1,350 meters, we do have a little less snow lower down from the high freezing levels that we've experienced. But it's good perspective to look at our historical records and see that really in the big picture, we're not doing that badly. And even though for the locals it seems like it's been a tough winter, we have as much or more snow than anyone in the western North American states for ski areas, so we're still hanging in there and doing pretty good. Alright, enough of this inside talk. Let's go outside and take a look at some of the evidence of the last cycle. Here we are out on Sluice Box Corner on our ski area boundary, and we're taking a look up into Whitewater Bowl and the large avalanche that we were talking about inside. So we had a size 3 avalanche that came down during that cycle. If you look up onto the treed knob in the middle, you can faintly see the crowns where the avalanche released, where the top of the avalanche pulled out. So a lot of it came through the middle section, and then some of it came from up high, higher towards the ridge top. So there is some mature timber in that area and large chunks of debris in there as well. So definitely a place, this is an interesting area. A lot of people traverse out past the ski area boundary and just ski down, and they ski down Lower Goat Slide. You are outside of the ski area boundary in here. And lots of public do ski out in this area without avalanche equipment, so without a transceiver, a shovel, or a probe. But you have to understand, every time you cross one of these boundary lines, you are in backcountry terrain that is uncontrolled. So it does have the potential to release large avalanches, and in this case, very destructive avalanches. Here we are out in the bottom of this avalanche path, towards the bottom of the run out, and just to give some perspective, I'm 5.5 feet tall almost, and these are large chunks of snow in here that would be very devastating. And when you get a heavy wet slide like that, the ability to swim and kick and get your way out of here would be extremely difficult. Another thing that happened after this big storm cycled, and we had another period of warming, and we had quite a bit of sun and warm temperatures. We reached +4 up to 2,000 meters, and we had another natural cycle of loose, wet avalanches. The farthest one over that came out of Hummer Bee Chute ran to a size 2.5 avalanche. And then another one here, another size 1.5, and then I was standing over on the corner where we just were, and I watched the middle one, a size 1, come out. Often when we think of a point release avalanche, a loose snow avalanche, when it's dry snow, they're not generally destructive unless you're in, you know, bad terrain where you could get pushed into a train trap. But when you have a loose, wet avalanche, imagine it's just like concrete getting poured down the slope. So if you're standing underneath that or in a bad place, it again can have a pretty destructive effect on you. So that's our information for this week. We hope you enjoyed Backcountry Skiing Canada and Whitewater Ski Resort's avalanche conditions report for the week. We've got some fun things coming up this weekend. We've got our Kootenay Cold Smoke Powder Festival. Check out the Cold Smoke 2015 website for all the events. There's a movie night with some inspirational speakers Friday night at the Civic Theatre. There's a banquet on the Saturday. There's a ton of different events and clinics, both backcountry clinics and inbound clinics. All sorts of great fun to be had, and we'll have the best time we can this weekend. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks again for tuning in.